Coming up on this week's episode of CEO Yourself.
It was very much, I don't know if a whim is the right word to describe it, but we made the decision of we wanted to go back to the States. Okay, what do we need to do that?
Katie Harbison is creative director of her design agency, Harbison Design. She has a world-class and much adored interior design style that is coveted around the globe. On today's episode of CEO Yourself, we deep dive her CEO superpower, multitasking. Katie Harbison, welcome to CEO Yourself.
Thank you for having me.
It is such an honour to have you here. I have long admired your work and your incredible aesthetic, so thank you for making the time.
I'm very happy to be here, so thank you for having me.
Tell us about Katie Harbison Design and how it came to be.
Very organically, if I'm being completely honest. It really started for a love and need of wanting to move back to New York. I was there for 2 years in my early 20s. And James, my partner, and I made that decision that we wanted to go back to the States. And it really evolved from I'd say, that need and want to be there. And once we made that decision, things very organically and I'd say serendipitously fell into place.
It's amazing how the universe kind of just guides you in the right direction when you're following where you're meant to be.
100%. And I'm very much a universe person. And I always do put it down that, I say a lot of the time, I always say it's luck, how everything's happened. And people always say, no, it's not luck, it's hard work. But if I'm being honest, to my core, I believe it's, the universe and positive affirmations and all that kind of led us to where we are now.
And a combination of the two, I guess.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Let's say that.
You have the most incredible design. You are a creative leader, in my opinion. You're a thought leader. And your work is unmatched.
Well,
how would you describe your style to the listener who can't visualize it?
I would say, first, my style definitely changed in 2017, I think it was. I moved to Florence for a year to do my master's. And that's where it took a big turn. I was really inspired by the more classical architecture and the design and the history that just, is everywhere in Florence. You can't get away from it. Not that I wanted to. And I came back and I had this real love for more classical and traditional architecture and kind of design processes. So I think that is where the root of even though I had been working, I had maybe 6 years at the time, I took like a big turn in terms of what I was drawn to, what my aesthetic was, what my design language was. I would say I have a mix of vintage, classical, traditional style, but bringing a more contemporary flair to it. So I try to marry all those three aspects when I'm designing. So there's a juxtaposition between all of these design styles and eras, but kind of thoughtfully curated and designed so that they work together and they blend together. A lot of the projects that we work on are, well, in London anyway, are listed properties that have heritage character. And I really like to honor that style and that architecture. And I try to design interiors that enhance that rather than fight it or are combative with the architecture, because I very much believe the two are married and they live and work in tandem.
What I love about your design is it's polished and clean and perfect, but it's so warm and livable. And that's what you've managed to achieve. Is two of my friends have been so lucky to work with you, and seeing what you've created with them is, it might be the most incredible sofa you can buy, but you create it, you place it in a set that I feel comfortable lounging on said sofa.
Good.
It's not a show home, it's a home.
Yeah, for sure.
And that is what I think makes your work. That is what I think makes your work stand out so much, is the warmth that you create.
For sure. And I think, when you work with private clients, you get to know these people quite intimately, and you have to envisage how they live or how they will live in the space. What are their needs? What are their wants? And you have to honor those requests, because at the end of the day, you're designing a home for them. and it has to be livable. Yes, they do want a beautiful home that they're proud to take their family and their friends and live in. But, they also will sit up and chill out on the sofa and watch the TV and play with their children. So it has to be livable yet elevated. And I think that's kind of the I guess the happy medium that we try and bring when we're designing.
Looping back to the comment about hard work, I do think your incredible work ethic plays a huge part in your success. You currently have huge projects going on in all different corners of the world, which means you're constantly traveling.
Mm-hmm.
And you've chosen the CEO superpower multitasking, which I can't wait to deep dive. You manage to have these projects going on with so many intricate details. How do you do it all?
I would say first and foremost, organization. I think like many creatives probably would say the same as, for me, myself, I have a very overactive brain. So being organized is the number one fundamental principle in our company. I think without it, it would just be, shambles and everything would be everywhere, especially when you work on several projects kind of in tandem and, you're involved in every single detail. Taking our Dallas project, for example, that was a lot of land. When we came on, we were given a set of plans and it was our job to basically draw up and design that. So there's so much detail, which I think maybe sometimes is overlooked, but there's so much detail goes into designing these projects that you have to be organized and detail orientated for it to work, or else it will just become chaos.
What's an example for the listener of an organizational practice that you utilize for success?
Asana. If you don't have, do you use Asana?
No.
Okay, it is a godsend.
Really?
So Tommy, who works with us, every Thursday we have a resource call. We forecast at least the next week, but we usually, for bigger projects, they're forecasted out. But we do room by room, everything that will go into that room. So, designing, elevating, rendering, modeling, whatever. And it's broken down to, okay, who will be working on that? What days will that be working at? So you have deadlines and targets. I think when you're working across several big projects where there is so much drawing work going into them that you need to you need to organize your days of what you'll be doing. Otherwise, it would, or for me anyway, it would just become chaos. And it needs to, have clear, defined days and roles on that.
Multitasking is often considered a negative.
Yes.
And it has a bad reputation. And I'm excited to flip that on its head today with you, because when I was looking into multitasking, everywhere it said, don't multitask, focus on the task at hand, and then move on to the next. But something I think you want to deep dive is that can be your process of multitasking.
Yeah. And if I'm being honest, when I asked, I said to James, what is my, CEO superpower? He kind of just rolled it off his tongue and he's like, without a shadow of a doubt, multitasking. I was like, at first I was like, really? Because I think that I'm not that great. As I was saying, if I was messaging, say, a client and you were talking to me, I would have to switch off between one of the two because I couldn't do both in tandem. However, with work is, and these are James's words, he's like, it's kind of extraordinary how you can juggle all these different projects and all these different clients who a lot of the time are WhatsApping you all at the same time or calling you or emailing you throughout the day. You could be running across 5, 6, however many projects and being pulled and asking questions. And he's like, your ability to, he's like, without even looking on, the Dropbox or a drawing or whatever, trying to get that information. He's like, your ability to recall a detail on a project that you worked on 2 years ago, he said, is quite impressive. And I would say personally, I'm not that person. I struggle to remember what I ate last night for dinner, but I think when it comes to work, I'm so ingrained in these projects and you're so, the reality is they do consume, well, for me anyway, they consume my life. That sounds a negative, but, very much a positive is you're always thinking what am I doing here? What, how can I always make this better? How can I elevate this space, And each project has to be better than the last. And you're constantly thinking of new ways to be creative and to give your client, the best design you possibly can, whilst still running your other projects. So, everything's at different stages for us. We've projects, two are completing in the next couple of weeks. We have projects that are about to start. Then we've projects that are on site. So it's very much different stages, and you have to be still involved from, start right through to completion.
What I was going to say is it sounds as if you have the capacity to multitask because your processes are so strong.
Yeah, I to be honest, I think without call it apps or softwares, like Notion or Asana, where you actually organize and program your days, your weeks, your month, your projects, it will be really difficult, So even before, and in full transparency, Tommy was the one who brought all this in, and I'm obsessed with him for doing it.
Brilliant to credit your team. I love that.
But, our first year when it was just James and I, we were running 3 big projects that really, Dallas started, LA started 2 weeks after, and then a project in Regent's Park started maybe a month after. So we were running 3 pretty hefty projects at the same, really all kicking off at the same time. And again, we just started KHD, so there was no way we were going to say no to these amazing opportunities. I should say now we do stagger so that we're not overloaded. But, the reality was I was doing like calendars of, okay, you need to get through X, Y, and Z each day, and you don't stop working until you've gotten through that. Wasn't as sophisticated as the practices we have in now, but it worked because it was just me doing the design, and, and especially when it is your own company, there's a different, I don't want to say pressure, but there's a different level of ownership and responsibility that, like, I can't say to a client, oh, sorry, I'm working on something else, so I don't have your project or your presentation ready. They don't care.
You have to be available to them at all times, and the answers are critical and time sensitive.
For sure. And it's funny, I look back at our first year when it was just James and I, and we were back in my mum's house in Ireland. And it was wild to think, we were working crazy hours. And our Dallas project, our clients live in San Francisco. And we were taking, there's a time I was taking, usually they were 10 o'clock, but sometimes, it would be pushed back an hour. So I'd be starting a meeting at 11 p.m., having, started work probably at 8 a.m. in the morning.
I think it's really good for people to hear the level of work and commitment that has gone into creating what you're creating.
For sure. And look, they are long hours, and, your weekends, still are your weekends. But at the end of the day, if I need to work, or if emails or WhatsApps or calls come in, they will be addressed at the weekend. But I love it so much that I would say my job is a big part of who I see myself as a person. And a lot of people, a job is a means to work and to live, which I completely understand. But for me, my job encompasses who I see myself as a person. And I'm so passionate about it that I will happily work 12, 14, however many hours it takes in the day to get what I need done.
Can you talk to us about the hours in a day and what an average day looks like from a multitasking perspective? So for the listener out there who wants to level up the work that they do, how would you recommend, what does a perfect day look like for you?
I will say I'm working on that, because I know it's probably not the most healthiest. But I'd say what I'm trying to do, well, typically I wake up quite early. I think as well, because we live in Europe, but a lot of our work is in the UK. I try to be online maybe by 6 a.m., 7 a.m.
Wow.
And then the better habit that I'm getting in is usually that I would just work straight through to 6, 7 p.m., 8 p.m. And I recognize that that's immensely unhealthy. So, little things like James and I in the morning, maybe around 8, we go out for a walk in our neighborhood and we get a coffee. And it's only 15, 20 minutes, but it's just nice to get out of the house. And if I'm being honest, it's like when I'm at home, it's immensely unexciting because I am just in front of a computer. A lot of Zoom meetings. It's nice that we now have projects in New York that you can physically meet with your clients, because for a long time it was me going with suitcases of samples and everything always to these sites or to the clients. I would say we do travel quite a lot with work, whether that's sourcing or seeing sites, seeing clients. I think when we're traveling, our days are very different. It's a lot of FaceTime with people, a lot of interaction, a lot of site visits, a lot of supplier meetings, and that obviously is wildly different to a normal day. But when we're at home, it's really just you're in front of your computer, and
it's not as fabulous as the Instagram show.
It's not.
Which is good for people to hear.
People always ask like, "Oh, we'd love to see like a day
in the life."
It's like it's so boring. It's me in a tracksuit in our next room. It's funny. A friend who lives actually above us, she always jokes Instagram versus reality, because she's like, when you're at home, you're in your tracksuit, your hair's on top, and not even. I'm not one of these people when I have Zoom meetings with clients, I'm never made up. I'm no makeup.
And that is a myth I want to debunk with CEO Yourself. I worked late last night. I got up at 5 a.m. this morning to commute in to be here. It's about lifting the lid on the reality of what it takes to create the life of your dreams and to create a meaningful business. And it's not the Instagram highlights reel. The reality is long days in front of your computer.
Yeah. And the reality is usually I'll be in some form of tie-dye with my hair at top knot.
I love that. I want to see that side of you. So let's talk about design, because this is something I'm sure the listener will be drawn to in seeing your name. How can we elevate our space on a minimal budget? What are easy tips and tricks we can do to make our space feel and look more Katie Harbison?
I am such a lover of vintage, and people sometimes associate vintage being expensive, but you can go, there's, especially over here, there's so many great markets, thrift shops, antique dealers, vintage dealers that you can go and you can find, for me anyway, amazing finds for Arlington, for example. You get the most amazing knickknacks, call it, for, they won't necessarily break the bank. So I always think bringing those things that have character and charm and warmth and, history and, there's a story behind each of those pieces into your home always will elevate that. I think as well, filling your home with things that you collect on your travels, that then is a story and means something to you. And, a lot of the time when we design, clients always say, especially with art, is it's so personal and it's very subjective, and yes, we specify art, but sometimes they say, we want some blank walls because we want to fill it ourselves, and whether that's from their own travels or in time, whenever they find a piece that resonates with them.
But you have a natural eye for curating the new and the old and those little knickknacks that you speak of. How can I implement a little piece of your style in a space? Because I feel you mix the new and the old in such a unique way.
Yeah, I well, thank you, but I always say, if you put if everything was vintage, it's going to feel like probably like your granny's house. If everything's brand new, it's going to feel, in my opinion, soulless. It's that balance of finding new world meets old, and kind of letting them work in harmony together. It's as well like playing with different objects, different shapes, different heights. If you put anything of the same size or scale, it's not going to work together. So it's seeing, take a shelving unit, for example, books, ceramics, vases, frames, artwork, etc. And it's merging that all together and playing with the different height and finding what works together and what doesn't. And I tend to group a little bit of everything together just so that you have that balance and it's not too much of the same thing.
When we look at your work, it is then this perfectly curated space. How can we make the space maintain that presentable kind of image whilst living in it? Because as I said to you, I have kids and I feel as if like once a month I make the space perfect and then kind of life gets in the way. I'm one of those people who has a chair in the corner of my room, which over the week kind of accumulates clothes that I've been trying on. And my husband always says like, why can't you just put it back as you go? How do you maintain a space whilst living in it? I assume you have extraordinary organizational habits. Are there any kind of tips and tricks you can share with the listener about how to keep a space looking good whilst living in it?
I mean, I won't reference myself because James and I, we have no children and we live together. So it's easy for us to keep our space clean. But
you say easy, but it's not easy.
I should say as well, I'm quite OCD. So and James has probably by default taken on some of my habits.
What are those little habits? Like what are some organizational skills we can implement just to keep our space looking how I know I can imagine yours looks?
I'm a fiend. So like people always, what I'd say in terms of my home, what you will see on Instagram is how it's always, it's not staged for that. But again, we're two people. I would say storage, first of all. That there's a place for everything, that it can go back in its home, because look on our shelves and stuff, it's all beautifully curated, but you also then need to live and you need to have your everyday objects, which we have probably hidden away.
It probably helps you multitask knowing that everything's in its space. Like a clean environment is a clean mind,
Exactly that. And I think actually that's a very good point, because my brain is so overactive that if everything wasn't as it needs to be, it would just be chaos. So like even down to, and it's funny, or I always think it's funny when I'm screen sharing, and if I'm just trying to find something on our Dropbox, so many times our clients are like, whoa, like your everything is so organized on your computer and on your folders. And for me, it just has to be, or else it'd be carnage.
I'm the same. I have to empty my inbox and my whole WhatsApp. I archive every message at the end of every day so that the inbox is
I can't bear a clogged inbox. So
and you were so responsive in the lead up to this episode. I've never seen anything like it. The email responses were within kind of 3 minutes.
I can't slow down. It will irk me.
So your level of organization is extreme.
Yeah. I mean, right down to my phone, my apps. If you go by the pages, even my home screen's color coordinated by my apps are. So like you've got blue, green. It goes from light as well to dark.
And I think that that's probably an important element of how to multitask, is if you have clear processes, clear systems, and you're incredibly well organized, it will be easier to jump between things because you know where things are.
For sure. And I think that without it, our jobs or my job wouldn't be able to be as efficient as it could be, because it would just be chaos. And there's so many documents, drawings, schedules, information that backs that up, that if you're trying to find any of this, it's just going to be a shambles.
Looping back to your comment about your work being who you are, did you always know this was what you were going to do? Was it always your calling?
I'd say from about 15 I did. I had a love with fashion and interiors. And if I'm being completely honest, I was like, fashion will be so hard to make or to like break it in. And it was more styling. I liked fashion styling. So yeah, from about 15, I knew I wanted to get into interiors. I always, and still to this day, being in a well-designed, whether it's a hotel, a house, it makes you feel good. And that's what I love, or have always loved about interiors, is how being in that space can make you feel. Whether that's your granny's house and a smell, or your own home, or sitting in front of a fire. It's how that environment makes you feel, and the memories, it can bring back for you.
When What is the most important sense in a room? Is it smell or touch or how it looks?
That's a good question. I would say, I don't know if it's a sense, but I'd say light for me is probably the biggest factor. I've really, especially over the years, we love our apartment, but the one thing that it lacks drastically is natural light. It gets it at the front of the house, which is the bedroom, which the reality is we're never in there unless it's nighttime and go to bed. Is light. And I always say to James, when the time comes for us to get our own place, like buy our place, it could be the most magnificent house. And if there's no light in those primary spaces, I won't take it. So yeah, I'd say that plays a big factor.
How can you encourage the listener to pursue their calling and their passion as you have?
I would say, just go for it, honestly. Even like taking what we did as an example, it was very much, I don't know if a whim is the right word to describe it, but we made the decision of we wanted to go back to the States. Okay, what do we need to do that? It wasn't this big, huge, grand plan that we had all of these forecasts in place. Okay, we need to do X, Y, and Z to get here. Just go for it. You will learn along the way. I mean, I was told by someone very close to me when we were starting this, you don't know the first thing about, and it was really discouraging me from doing this. And you don't know the first thing about business. You don't know the first thing about accounts. You don't know the first thing about, and my answer was, I don't. And thankfully, I have James to do that. But also, you learn. There's so many things in this process that are new to us. Running a company is new to us. Hiring, having a staff like that work with you. That's new to us. You figure it out, and I would say it's been, without a shadow of a doubt, the last 3 years have been like the happiest of my. It's so worth it, and for something that I would say was not only not planned, but I never grew up thinking I want one day to have my own company. It was never. It was never a vision or I don't want to say a dream. Obviously, that would have been a great dream, but it was just something that was never really a goal or an aspiration for me. And you just, along the way, you learn new things. And I would also say, like, be a sponge, like absorb everything that people, advise people give you, even being on sites. I try, sit and listen as much as possible because, and learn from the contractors, learn how something is made so that when you're designing, okay, well, how will that actually be fabricated? How will that operate? And just take it all in.
You're such an inspiration to me, Katie, because watching you follow your calling, bring your passion to life. If this is the beginning of KHD, I cannot begin to imagine what's to come, because what you've created in the first few years of this business is just astounding on a global scale. And if you're out there listening, please go and find Katie on Instagram and look up and follow and see what you're developing, because I think you can take away little elements of your style and implement them in your home. As you said, at the local flea market, or even pieces from places like IKEA, you can replicate elements of your style.
100%.
And I hope in the future there is a product line that we can engage with.
Let's see. We haven't thought about it, but who knows?
The sky's the limit, but I just know that the future holds so much greatness for you.
Thank you.
And it's such a wonderful journey for me watching it all unfold. I also am so grateful for your truth and honesty around the work that goes into it and how hard you work and the habits and the processes you have to implement in order to bring these projects to life, because we are also renovating our house and I see what goes into it.
It's a lot.
It is a lot. Katie, what is your legacy piece of advice?
I would say be true to who you are and what you want to do. I think if anything that I've learned in this is, if I didn't love what I did, it wouldn't be a success, because you have to live and breathe it. Being us, that it's our own company, we, we do live and breathe it. But I think if you don't love what you do, you will begin to resent it. So much time, effort, energy. I mean, your holidays are no longer your holidays. Your weekends aren't your weekends. And I think if you didn't enjoy it, you just wouldn't be able to give the best version of yourself. So I would say find what you love, and follow that, and just keep your head down and do it, and it will all work out. I think from a design perspective, my legacy piece would be not to follow trends. Like fashion, they will come and go, and same thing, figure out what makes you happy and what makes you comfortable and brings you joy. And look at more so, or for me anyway, how I design would be looking at the history and kind of bringing that back in. My legacy advice would be, from a design perspective, is to not follow a trend, and to design, or your space, call it, something that in 5 years' time, 10 years' time, will still love, and it will bring you joy to be in and to live in. Otherwise, it will, like any fashion trend, it will come and go.
You are, as I said, such an inspiration, and I know my friends just love working with you and the process. So thank you for all that you do and all the inspiration you share with all of us. Where can the listener find you?
On our Instagram, which is just my name, Katie_Harbison. And we do have a website, which in full honesty is not up to date, but all our details are there. And that's katieharbison.co.
Brilliant. I will be sharing you all throughout Instagram this week, and I can't wait to see everything that's to come for you, Katie.
Thank you, Hermione. It was such a joy and pleasure meeting you and getting to chat to you today.
Thank you. It would mean the world to me if you would share today's episode with someone you feel would enjoy it. And don't forget to hit subscribe, like, and leave a comment.